Hey everyone! In this tutorial I will show you how to make the Primrose dress, which is an elegant dress with sculptural pleats around the waist to create a corset-inspired feminine silhouette. You can make it as a mini, midi and maxi dress, as well as a top. You can find the link to the pattern and the materials in the description below, so let's get started. First, cut out all the pattern pieces and transfer the notches. Prepare the front and back pieces for sewing. Secure the necklines, armholes, shoulder and side seams with stay tape to prevent the fabric from stretching. Iron the side of the tape with the glue to the wrong side of each piece. Make some small snips in the tape to ease the curves. If you don't have stay tape, you can also cut 1 cm wide strips of fusible interfacing along the grain line and use that as a stay tape. Transfer the pleating marks from the pattern pieces to the wrong side of the front and back pieces with an erasable pen or tailor's chalk. If you're making a drop waist version, the pleats will end at the bottom circles. For the natural waist version, they will end at the circles in the middle. Make sure to transfer as accurate as possible. You can punch small holes through the circles on the pattern pieces with a sharp object, such as small thread scissors, and then place the pieces on the fabric and transfer the holes, after which you can then connect them with a ruler. Pin the pleats together with the right sides facing each other, so you are pinning on the wrong side of the fabric. The lines with the arrows in between them are being pinned together. I am using a lot of pins, as you can see, but you could also consider hand pleating to achieve a most accurate result for the pleats. Now sew each pleat together following the markings. Once done, press the pleats to the side seams. We will now install the invisible zipper to the back pieces. First we will stabilize the top back seams. Cut 2 pieces out of the fusible interfacing following the measurements provided in the pattern. Fuse the interfacing from the top to the middle of the wrong side of the center back seam. Mark the 1.5 cm seam allowance to the right side of the fabric at the center back with an erasable pen or tailor's chalk. Please note that the raw edges of the center back seam will be finished with a Hong Kong bias binding at a further step. However, if you would like to skip this, you can finish the raw edges with an overlocker or zigzag stitch at this step. Using an iron on low heat, open the zipper and press the zipper teeth away from the zipper sides. Place the back pieces right side facing up. Unzip the zipper and put it right side down. Place one side of the zipper on one of the center backs with the zipper teeth aligning to the seam allowance mark. The top of the zipper teeth should align with the top notch on the center back. Pin this in place. Switch your machine foot to an invisible zipper foot. Place the foot so that the groove at the foot bottom fits over the teeth and the needle goes through the hole in the center, sewing right next to the zipper teeth. Start at the top and sew downwards until you can't go any further as you have reached the zipper bottom. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and end. You might have to press the zipper teeth a bit to the side with your fingers while sewing to prevent it from getting caught in the needle. Take the second back piece. Flip the zipper so the right side is facing upwards. Next, flip the part of the unsewn zipper side once more so the right side is facing down. Pin the right side of the zipper to the right side of the second back piece. Align the zipper teeth to the seam allowance mark. The top of the zipper teeth should align with the top notch on the center back. Double check the zipper is not twisted at the bottom. Sew the second sides of the zipper together. Zip up the zipper. Place the two back pieces on top of each other with the right sides facing each other. Pin the remaining seams together. Make sure the end of the zipper is facing out and not caught in between the seams. Sew following the seam allowance markings, starting a little bit above the end of the zipper and continue sewing to the end of the seam. You might like to use a normal zipper foot for the top part of the seam next to the zipper to make it easier to reach that area, after which you can switch back to your standard machine foot. Press the seam open once done. We will now finish the zipper area. Cut a 5 by 5 cm square out of some excess fabric. Press the square in half horizontally to create a crease. I will be using some spare acetate satin fabric for this, as I prefer a lightweight finish. Fold the square open again. Fold in both sides to meet the crease line and iron. You might prefer to iron one side first and then the other side. Next, fold the two sides together and iron. Place the zipper tab at the bottom of the zipper and mark the left and right sides where the zipper ends. Flip the zipper tab so the inside is facing out and sew the lines just marked. Trim the seam down to 2 mm and flip back. You can use a pointy object to push the corners back into shape. Press the tab. Sandwich the bottom of the zipper in between the zipper tab. Pin and sew together, sewing 2 to 3 mm from the top edge. Once done, secure the zipper tab to the internal seam, sewing 2 to 3 mm from the edges. Make sure not to accidentally sew the outside of the dress. We're only sewing it to the internal seam. We will now finish the back seam with a Hong Kong style bias binding. You can use pre-made bias tape or make your own. Please see the video link below, which explains how to make bias binding tape from a continuous loop as included in the pattern. Grab your 12 mm bias binding and pin the bias tape to the right side of the roll seam edge and zipper of one of the center back seams, with the right sides together. Sew together using a 6 mm seam allowance, and press the tape away from the seam once done. Wrap the bias tape over the raw edge so this is enclosed and pinned together. Make sure the width of the bias tape at the back is 1 mm larger than the front, as this will help us stitching in the ditch at the next step. Now sew the tape by stitching in the ditch, which means that you are sewing right in the channel of the seam at the front. Now repeat the steps for the other back seam and give the seams a final press, and then they are finished. Next, we will sew the back and front pieces together using a French seam. Pin the shoulder seams and side seams of the front and back pieces together with the wrong sides facing each other. If you wish to use an overlocker or zigzag stitch instead, you can skip these steps and just sew the seams together with the right sides facing using a 1.5 cm seam allowance, and then overlock them and press them to the back. Now for the French seams, sew them together using a 1 cm seam allowance and trim the roll seam back to 3 to 4 mm wide. Now flip the garment so that the wrong side is facing out and press the seams. Sew the seams using a 0.5 cm seam allowance and press the seams to the back once done. Next, we will finish the neckline with bias binding. Pin the right side of the folded edge of the binding to the right side of the neckline. At the center back, make sure the bias tape covers the unfolded zipper as well. For the curves, it helps to ease the bias binding, which will make it easier to sew the tape once it gets flipped to the inside of the garment. I know this could sound counterintuitive, as you might think the tape needs pulling, but doing the opposite, by easing, is actually the way to go. Now sew this together using a 6mm seam allowance, and press the seam upwards towards the binding once done. Next, understitch the bias binding to the seam, and then place some small snips in the curves to ease. Turn the bias binding to the inside of the garment and pin together. Fold the edges at the center back to the inside so the tape covers it, and trim any bulk if needed. Transfer this to your machine and top stitch the bias binding 2mm from the edge. I'm using a walking foot to prevent the fabric from shifting, since we are working with multiple layers here. And give it a final press once done. The armholes will also be finished with bias tape. Pin the right side of the folded edge of the binding to the right side of the armhole. At the start, fold the short end of the bias tape by 5mm to the inside. And after pinning the tape around, overlap the end on top of the beginning of the bias tape so there is a small overlap. Similar to the neckline at the curves, it helps to ease the bias binding, which will make it easier to sew once the tape gets flipped to the inside of the garment. Sew together using a 6mm seam allowance, and press the seam upwards towards the binding. Understitch the bias binding to the seam. Place some small snips in the curve to ease. Turn the bias binding to the inside of the garment and pin together. Top stitch the binding 2mm from the edge and press once done. Make sure to repeat the steps for the second armhole. We will now work on the bottom hem. Press the hem 0.5 cm to the inside. Then, if making the dress version, fold and press once more to the inside with a 4.5 cm allowance. If you're making the top version, fold and press once more to the inside with a 1.5 cm allowance. Sew the hem 2 to 3 mm away from the top of the pressed fold. If you like, you can now finish the dress by adding a hook and eye closure right next to the top of the zipper. As an optional step, you can now finish the dress by adding bows. Using some of the excess fabric, cut 3 pieces measuring 45 by 3 cm. Fold the pieces in half lengthwise, right sides facing together, and press. Sew them together. Start sewing 1 cm horizontally from the top for 1 cm, and then pivot and turn 90 degrees and sew downwards using a 0.5 cm allowance. Once done, trim the raw edges down to 2 to 3 mm. Now use a loop turner, or if you don't have that, a long thin pointy object such as a chopstick or pencil, and turn the tie right side out. For the small raw edge, fold this inwards for a couple of millimeters and hand sew to close. Repeat the steps for the other bows and give a final press once done. Now tie the ties to form bows and then pin the bows to the center front at the top where the pleats start, and pin them to the side seams where the pleats end. Hand sew together and secure the bows. Now the dress or top is finished. Double check for any loose threads to cut off and remove any erasable pen or chalk marks. I hope you enjoyed making the primrose dress or top. Please drop me a DM or comment if you have any questions, and thank you so much for watching.